bought the house because it was cheap, ridiculously so. The realtor said it was a fixer-upper, but the foundation was solid and it had potential. The only thing that seemed odd was the basement door. It wasn't like the rest of the house's weathered oak doors. It was new, sleek, and painted a deep, unnatural black. The realtor had joked, the last owner must have been modernizing, but there was something about it that unsettled me. The first time I tried to open it, it wouldn't budge. I figured it was painted shut, so I left it alone, thinking I'd deal with it later. That night, as I lay in bed, I heard a sound. It was faint at first, like a gentle tapping. It was coming from downstairs, from the black door. I tried to ignore it, pulling the covers over my head. The tapping grew louder, more insistent, and then stopped abruptly. A low whisper followed, too faint to make out words, but unmistakably human. The hairs on my arms stood up. The next morning, I convinced myself it was just my imagination. Old houses creak, I thought. I was tired, moving was stressful, there was nothing to worry about. But the door kept tapping, every night. After a week of sleepless nights, I decided to deal with it. I grabbed a crowbar, intent on prying the door open. As I wedged the bar into the seam, a chill swept over me, and for a moment, I swore I heard breathing on the other side. "Get it together," I muttered, forcing the door open with a groan of protesting wood. The basement beyond was dark, too dark. Even with my flashlight, the beam seemed to get swallowed by the void. The air smelled wrong damp, metallic, and faintly sweet, like rotting fruit. At the bottom of the stairs, I found a chair. Just a chair. It was old, wooden, and stained with something dark. Behind it, carved into the concrete wall, were dozens of handprints, smeared in what I could only hope was paint. But the strangest thing? There was no light bulb, no windows, nothing that could account for the faint, flickering light illuminating the room. It seemed to be coming from the chair. I backed out of the basement and slammed the door shut, nailing it shut for good measure. That night, the tapping returned. Louder this time, angrier. The whispers were clearer now, voices overlapping, chanting something guttural and rhythmic. I pressed my ear to the floor, trying to make out the words. "We see you. We see you. We see you." The tapping became pounding. I ran to the basement door and stood there, paralyzed. The pounding stopped, replaced by a slow, deliberate scraping sound. Something was scratching the inside of the door. The next morning, the scratches were visible, deep gouges etched into the wood. I called a locksmith, desperate to get rid of the door entirely. He arrived that afternoon, took one look at the door, and shook his head. "I can't do anything with this," he said, stepping back. "You need to call someone else. This isn't a normal door. What the hell are you talking about?" I snapped, but he just muttered an apology and left. That night, everything escalated. The whispers started earlier, just after sundown. The house felt colder than usual, the kind of cold that settles in your bones. I locked myself in my bedroom, clutching a knife and a flashlight, but the noises didn't stop. The pounding became deafening, shaking the entire house. I heard voices screaming, overlapping, as if dozens of people were trapped on the other side of the door. Then came the laughter. It wasn't human. It was high-pitched and distorted, echoing through the walls like a broken record. I pressed my hands to my ears, but the sound was inside my head, growing louder and louder until I thought I would go insane. And then it stopped. The silence was worse. I ventured out of the bedroom, knife trembling in my hand. The basement door was open, swinging gently on its hinges. I knew I hadn't touched it. Something was standing at the top of the stairs. It was tall, its limbs too long and too thin, its head tilting unnaturally to one side. Its face was obscured, but I could see its mouth, an impossibly wide grin filled with jagged teeth glistening in the dim light. It raised one skeletal hand and beckoned. Behind it, the basement seemed to stretch endlessly, the faint flickering light casting long, undulating shadows. Whispers poured from the void, now deafening, an incomprehensible chorus that vibrated in my chest. I ran. I fled the house that night, abandoning everything I owned. When I told the police, they found nothing unusual, no scratches, no strange door, just an empty basement. They chalked it up to stress and exhaustion. But the house wasn't done with me. A week later, I woke in the middle of the night to tapping. Not from the house. I was staying at a motel miles away, but from the closet. My blood turned to ice as I approached it, every nerve in my body screaming at me to run. Slowly, I opened the door. Inside, leaning against the back wall, was the black door. Its surface was covered in fresh scratches, and from behind it I heard the whispers. "We found you."